Howdy folks, this is CowTipper Vern again. Leaving an extreme, high-control religious group involves deconstructing how you view many topics. It involves reassessing them, redefining them in a healthier way, and then reclaiming them. Today I'm going to talk about emotion. 2x2 culture controls emotions. A lot of the beliefs of friends and workers center around how your emotions are bad. Actually, a lot of 2x2 beliefs center around how you're bad, how you were made badly, you need to be fixed. God really wants you to be fixed. God really wants you to fix yourself before he has to see you and deal with you. And you should feel shame all the time about how you normally are. Normally, normal people have emotions, and 2x2s don't like that. They don't like emotions. They like a certain set of emotions, and they'll retool a lot of language to make emotions seem a different way. That's going to be a theme of the next few videos I do. The next few videos I do are going to be about different ways that 2x2s and 2x2 culture manipulates language for certain ends, to make their beliefs sound a certain way, to control the people within so that they stay there. 2x2s don't get a lot of converts. They don't convert a lot of people to their way. Very, very few. So a lot of the messaging within the 2x2s is centered around manipulating you so that you don't leave. It's really important that you stay. And it's really important that you are stuck there. And it's really important that you raise your kids there. Because otherwise the way is going to go away completely. They don't spread the gospel at all. One of the ways that they do this is to manipulate emotions so that you're always pointing back toward the meetings, so that the meetings can tell you exactly how to feel. And so feeling another way feels wrong. Feeling normal feels wrong. Feeling like a normal person actually feels wrong. The messaging in the 2x2s is you're a bad person, you were born bad, and you've been created bad. And they never really reconcile that God created you, and for some reason he created you badly. But that's okay. It's fine. The main message is, however you are normally is bad, and you need to be fixed. You need to retool how you feel to be more professing. According to 2x2 culture and beliefs, whatever feelings you normally have are wrong. They're worldly, they're fleshly, they're of the flesh, or of the world. They're not good, and God doesn't approve of them, so you need to change them. And I'm going to go over a few different ways that they do that. I'm going to go over a few emotions and how they are manipulated, and how they're renamed in some cases, or how we're taught to actually dislike the names of certain emotions. And then at the end of this, I'm going to talk about an emotion that they made up and that a lot of people have and only exists within the 2x2s. In the 2x2s, we're raised to just tamp down our emotions all the time and mute them and not have too strong of emotions. Anytime there's a strong emotion, it's reframed as worldly and bad without any respect really for why the emotion is happening, what's causing it. They don't want you to be too angry. They don't want you to be too happy either. They like happiness, but only certain types of happiness. Sadness gets manipulated heavily. It gets hijacked, frankly. And all of these, well, really you could say that about all of them. All of the emotions that you have get hijacked for use as 2x2 tools. Happiness is actually talked down on by workers. And I've never really understood the point of this because I don't think they have to do it. Happiness is actually spoken of badly by workers as if it's some sort of worldly emotion, like it's sinful in some way. It's really funny. Workers love to talk about joy. We talk about joy all the time. No one really knows what it means, but they vibe with it. You feel joy only certain times. You feel joy at convention. You feel joy in prayer. You feel joy in worshiping in any way. But it's not necessarily happiness. So often you'll hear workers at conventions talk about, well, the world has happiness. The world, things that bring happiness in the world just don't bring true joy, do they? That's one of my favorite ways of manipulating language, is putting a word in front of another word to completely negate the point of the word. So joy can mean whatever, but true joy, well, that we own that. We own true joy. True joy is godly, and by godly we mean professing. Those words get manipulated a lot too. Someday I'll do a whole episode just on manipulation of different words, but happiness and joy is the funniest one because happiness is universally seen as good, except in the 2x2s where it's not good enough. The reason it's not good enough is because other people experience it. People inside experience happiness. That's good. People outside experience happiness too. Well, we can't have that. They can't be right about that. So how can we reframe this so that we own the happy feeling? I know, let's call it joy. We have joy. We have joy from God. We have joy from whatever, spiritual joy. That way we can belittle even the happiness of people out in the world, quote unquote. Worldly people doing worldly things can't possibly be enjoying it or having a good time. And if they are, it's not good enough. They can just have worldly happiness, but it fades. It ends, doesn't it? Worldly happiness comes to an end. All those things fade away, don't they? But this joy that we're feeling at convention, as we sit here on hard benches being told we're going to hell, that's true joy. That's wonderful, isn't it? We'll feel this for a few days and then have to go back to work. But we'll still know that we're better than all those people in the world. The main thing is to be better than worldly people. That's the main thing. You're dressed like you don't want to dress. You're sitting on benches you don't want to sit on. You're doing a lot of things that a normal person wouldn't enjoy, so you have to feel joy while you're doing it. And you have to know that that joy is superior to anything anyone else feels. True joy. It's true joy. It's sort of like they put true in front of the word, kind of like they'll put godly in front of words or righteous in front of words, to negate the fact that the word they say after that doesn't mean what they want it to mean. They'll just modify it by putting true in front of it. This is true joy that we have. People who don't have true joy are happy, but they're happy wrong. And that's really important for 2x2s. Anger is another emotion that gets manipulated and played with a lot by 2x2s. There's a couple different ways that anger is good, but most of the time it's bad. And I would say they have it flipped around backwards. And I'll talk about why that is. Anger typically has negative connotations no matter where you are in the world. Even if you're worldly, you don't like anger a lot of times because it's uncomfortable. But the reason it's uncomfortable sometimes is because it's needed. It's needed to be used for something. It's a tool. In 2x2 culture, it's reframed a lot of times. There's two different types. There's a good anger, which is a righteous anger. And I don't know if they would actually call it righteous anger, but we used to see a lot more of it. When I was younger, I remember workers talking from the platform, especially older brother workers, would just get up and yell a lot. I won't use any names, but if you've been to a lot of meetings in your life, you probably remember back in maybe the 80s and 90s, there were several workers who were less soft-spoken, I would say, who would get up and just shake their fists and yell about how bad the world is and yell about how we need more workers out there, I remember a worker one time just yelling at all the friends at a convention that the world doesn't need so many doctors and lawyers and dentists and things. The world needs workers. And he was just yelling it, just yelling into the microphone. I remember many workers who used to yell like that. And it was entertaining. Might be a little scary for if you're younger, I'm not sure. I always thought it was pretty funny, to be honest, until it got real personal, telling hundreds and hundreds of people, including a bunch of college-age kids, that they shouldn't be in college, they should be going into work. That was a sort of acceptable anger. There was an anger about the state of the world, there was an anger especially about you, state of the world in general, but also about you. You have a sinful life. You are happy at the wrong times. You do lots of bad things. You have bad inclinations. Those are bad. I'm angry about that. And that's a righteous anger that's sort of acceptable. They'd get angry about people getting divorced. They'd get angry about how women dressed a lot. A lot of that old righteous anger was about things that nowadays aren't quite as big of a deal. And that's progress in a way, but it's still strange to look back on. But that was acceptable because it was older brother workers. Most other people couldn't talk like that. They didn't have the authority, real or implied. When other professing people were angry, if the reason they were angry wasn't justified in the minds of other friends and workers, then they would call it hardness. You still hear that now. You still hear people talking about, they have a hard heart, don't they? Especially exes, when they're talking about people who've left meetings and joined the ex community. Well, we don't want that hardness in our heart, do we? Hardness in the heart is one of those things that doesn't really mean anything. It's sort of like bitter. There's no real definition for it. It's just, we just know it's bad. We know that they have an attitude that we don't like, and they don't believe the same as we do oftentimes. Or maybe they're displaying some trait or characteristic or behavior that we think is wrong, so we'll blame them for it. And so any emotion that they show about it will retranslate badly. And if they're angry about something, if we can't call them bitter, we'll call it hardness. We'll say they have hardness in their hearts. It'll show that they have an actual flaw. It's not that the fact that they have this emotion, it's not that emotion is justified in any way. It's that there's something fundamentally wrong with them. Kind of like saying they're bitter. They have hardness. They have hardness in their heart. That's a really handy sleight of hand to avoid ever dealing with the anger. Anger matters. Anger is important sometimes, and sometimes you need to be angry about certain things. The 2x2s are going through a lot of things right now, having to do with abuse, CSA, SA, etc. I've heard workers talking from the platform about how there's not as much peace now, and there's not as much joy, and our fellowship has been damaged, without acknowledging the obvious fact that people are angry for a reason. Injustice has happened. Injustice is a good reason for anger. That doesn't mean you want to be angry forever. It means you want to understand that emotion is leading you to work on something. It's leading you to pay attention. It's leading you to maybe fight for some kind of a cause, maybe intercede for somebody else who can't do it, like a child, perhaps. Something like that. Being angry is a good reason for friends and workers to just kick you to the curb in their minds. They will not entertain it. They won't sit in the same room with somebody who's having strong emotions. In fact, sometimes when they get angry, they pull themselves out of the room, which is really interesting to me. Rather than saying, how can I channel this and use it as a form of communication? They ignore it, they tamp it down, they change it to something else. If it's somebody they don't like, they call it hardness. If it's somebody they do like, who has the right beliefs, they'll call it righteous anger, and then they'll just do whatever the worker says, I guess. I don't know. 2x2s have a funny way of dealing with anger, even in name. When they should be angry about something inside the group, but it's something that calls into question some of the validity of the group, they don't know what to call it anymore. So they call it lack of peace. Recently, one of the overseers was given some recommendations for a process for dealing with allegations within the group and some suggestions on how to handle maybe people who'd been in trouble with the law or had allegations or whatever. And he didn't like it, but he wasn't sure how to say that he didn't like it. In reality, he didn't like accountability, and he didn't like the structure that made it difficult for him to just have his word be law. But he couldn't say that, so he had to moralize it some other way. Or he had to spiritualize it in a way so as to completely neglect everyone else's feelings but his own. I heard a recording of this overseer talking to a bunch of other ministers. Mind you, he's not talking to a group of exes, he's not talking to the media, he's not talking to anybody else. He's talking to a bunch of ministers, many of whom wanted him to adopt this policy. A policy with a set of rules on how to handle things. And his response was he didn't want to do it because he'd prayed about it and he didn't have peace. Mind you, everyone else had prayed about it as well, and they wanted to do it. Everyone else had prayed about it as well, and they were in favor. Maybe not all of them were in favor, but many of them were. And many of the friends in the 2x2s had spent a year or so putting together this policy for how to handle everyone with care and within the law. And this overseer just didn't like it. But he couldn't just say he didn't like it. So he just said he didn't have peace. It's a clever thing to say because how can anybody doubt your peace? When everyone else is angry about something and you just don't feel comfortable with the idea of anger and it doesn't fit into your belief system, you have to call it something else. So he spiritualized it by saying he didn't have peace. That doesn't make any sense. It's a nonsense way of looking at it, but it's spiritual sounding, so who's going to say no? Who's going to question this person? He's the highest up person. He's the highest up minister in this region, in a corner of the United States. So nobody can question him. An overseer who doesn't have peace trumps a lot of other people who've put a lot of time, work, blood, sweat, tears, and prayer into solving a really legitimate problem. But they had anger. And he felt something. He must have felt something. Maybe he felt anger. Maybe he just felt discomfort. Maybe he felt some responsibility for the first time. And not responsibility like, which worker should I send where? Or who should go to what conventions? It was actual real responsibility for the first time. And he was faced with anger and had the ability to make some changes and to use those emotions that he saw for good, and chose not to because it was uncomfortable. A system that can't police itself is not a good system. One of the easiest ways to manipulate somebody out of their emotions is to spiritualize them away and say that, well, they have strong emotions, but If you believe right, you'll have peace. So forget the reason you had this emotion. You don't have peace, so you need to stop. That's done all the time in the 2x2s. Constantly. You hear it every year in meetings and conventions especially. We need peace. We want to have peace. If something's upsetting us, that's our fault. If we have a strong emotion about something, that means we don't have peace. And hey, we don't even have joy. Look at us. We don't have joy. We're angry. We're feeling sadness and grief about something. We're angry about abuse. We're sad that our family's been torn apart by workers. We have grief over the beliefs we had that are dying now because they were made to die by the group that was supposed to uphold them. We're bitter. We're angry. We're sad the wrong way. We don't have peace, so therefore we're wrong. It's extremely manipulative. I have a little personal story. I remember one time one of my kids was, I don't remember, maybe 3 or 4 years old, and was just having one of those bedtime meltdowns, like it had been a long day, and I don't know, something hadn't gone right in the eyes of my kid, and my kid just started raging about something, just yelling and screaming, and just had a complete tantrum meltdown. And I was too tired to deal with it. And I just thought, man, I don't even know what to do with this. I don't want to deal with this. Like, just go to bed, kid. Kid didn't want to go to bed. And the kid was yelling at me and saying that I was doing something wrong or something. I don't even remember what the topic was that set my kid off. But I remember just thinking, I'm just going to let this burn out. It's bedtime. This isn't going to last forever. And I sat down on the floor and sat there cross-legged and just said, okay, tell me about it. And my kid, who again was very young, 3 or 4 years old at the time, came over, sat in my lap, and kept right on raging. Just yelling, shaking fists, folded arms, everything, red in the face, furious about some injustice in their tiny little world. As they sat on my lap and leaned into my chest. And I realized it was kind of a light bulb moment for myself as a young parent, that anger they were feeling was just felt right to them. It was important. It was important to them. It was a communication tool. It meant that this kid saw injustice of some kind, didn't know what to do with that, and was just raging into the system, just screaming at the system, hey, system, in this case, family, hey, family, I'm really upset about this. I think it needs to change. I need help understanding this. I need help with it. The rage and the anger was sort of aimed at me, but it wasn't aimed at me in a personal sense. It was aimed at me because I was somebody that could help, that I was the one who was in control. I was the one in charge. I, as the dad, had the authority and the control there. And my kid understood that and really needed me to understand that they were upset and they felt like there was some injustice. I think of that story a lot because it changed how I viewed angry kids, for one thing, but anger in general. And as I'm watching the complete meltdown in the 2x2s right now, it's fascinating to me to see people, even on the inside, angry at things that you should be angry about, angry at abuse, angry at the neglect of victims, angry at the complete abdication of responsibility by people who are in charge, the people who will tell you you're going to hell, the people who will ruin your fellowship and tear your family apart on purpose, are taking no responsibility over problems that they created. There's anger about that, and that makes sense. People are raging into the system because that's the right place to put that. The correct place to go first with anger about what's happening in the system is to yell at the system. And the response is to dismiss them and call them hard and call them bitter and all these other things and grant no legitimacy to the feelings that they're feeling, which makes sense. Anywhere else in the world, I often say about the 2x2s that, beliefs aside, a random person off the street could handle problems better than they can because of their beliefs. Not the beliefs in God. That's not the issue. The issue isn't in a belief in a higher power. The issue is in a belief system that's organized the way it is, that's organized in an unaccountable way, that's organized in a way that victims can't be heard and perpetrators are free. anger about the level of injustice that has happened in that group is the correct emotion to feel. And I've been calling into conventions this year, and there's this quivering sadness about all those who have left and all those who are bitter and all those who are hard, and the anger shown toward them that they just don't want to hear. And what they've done is, rather than understand it and rather than try to empathize with it, they've retooled it, reworded it, spiritualized it, moralized it, and then washed their hands of it to make it look like the people who are having the emotions are bad people. Imagine if that's how I had treated my own kid when my kid was angry. What if I said, oh, well, you're a bad kid because you have that emotion? No. What I needed to do was listen, and I didn't even realize it at the time. People are leaving the 2x2s right now, not because they have lost all their belief, although that is happening, but they've lost the trust in the people that they've been told from day one of their lives to trust. That should be a red flag, and the anger they feel about that should be met with concern by the people in power, and it's not. It's being dismissed, it's being told that it's worldly, and it's been moralized away. And that's a bummer, and people will continue to leave, and it's going to get much smaller as a group, and that's okay. I hope that people leaving can find peace on the outside. And you know what? I hope they find happiness. There are a lot of emotions that get manipulated by 2x2 culture and beliefs and doctrines and stuff. And I'm not going to talk about a lot of them, but happiness and anger were my two favorites. I'll talk just for a second about sadness. Sadness and grief, which I know aren't the same things, but oftentimes they go together. Usually when we're sad, it's because we're grieving something. Or oftentimes, I should say. Oftentimes when we're sad, we're grieving something. There's a phenomenon in the 2x2s that's so fascinating to me. When people deconstruct their beliefs, there's often a series of things that bothered them while they were inside, and then one day something broke the shelf and caused them to walk away. This is on a lot of those lists, and that is manipulation of sadness and grief. If you've professed for a long time, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when I say the term professing funerals. Workers love to commandeer funerals. It's the weirdest thing, and it makes sense because we're all believing that everything we do has eternal consequences, right? And if you don't get it exactly right, God will send you to hell. Workers treat funerals of professing people as if they're another chance for a gospel meeting. And a lot of times, professing family likes that. They want that because they believe that that's what the person would have wanted. And maybe they're right. When professing people die, I'm sure a lot of them do want that. When professing people pass away, they often have a list of workers they'd like to speak at their funeral or hymns they'd like sung, something like that. And I'm not going to say that people shouldn't have their wishes granted at a funeral. I think that's a nice thing, actually. But I've also heard how badly that affects people who aren't professing and how it sours them so badly against the 2x2s. Going to a professing funeral and hearing some stale sermon that's been preached 1,000 times at different conventions and 100% of the time has nothing to do with the person who died is a real put off. And the reason I put it on this podcast is because it really manipulates emotion. I think it's intended to, actually. That's the dark part of all this. When people are sad or people are grieving, they're in a vulnerable state. And workers love to jump into vulnerable states and tell people that they better do this, this, and this if they want to go to heaven. And by this, and this, I just mean go to meetings and profess. That's all. It's not more complicated than that. Workers hijack funerals for their own purposes. And as such, it puts you in a weird emotional state because you're supposed to be happy about this. When people die professing, of course, they're the only ones going to heaven, so you should feel joy about that. And that is what makes this an emotional thing, because now all of a sudden you've put people who are professing in the audience in a very weird spot. Of course, they're sad that the person died. I've been sad at professing funerals before. I've been to many funerals where I knew the person who had passed away, and I was very sad about it. But also, you can't really grieve it. 2x2s have a very interesting, well, interesting is kind of a silly word for that. Dysfunctional. 2x2s have a dysfunctional relationship with grief because they never allow themselves to really grieve, not openly. Again, if you're in meetings and you're professing, you should feel joy all the time. Nobody knows what joy means, but you should feel it. It's a step above happiness. It's several steps above pleasure. All those worldly feelings that people feel, yours are better than that. So what happens when you go to a funeral is it's weird to feel sad and it's weird to feel grief. You never process grief the way most people try to process grief. Not in a healthy way, anyway. That's just my opinion. The only other thing I wanted to add was that it seems to me that grief and sadness are best experienced as a community. If you have grief, if you're sad about things, if you've experienced loss, it would be really helpful to have community around to help you through that situation. When workers speak at these funerals, it makes it so the funeral is not about the person at all. The person who passed away is just a side note in what otherwise is just a gospel meeting or a mission. The communal grief that should be happening is completely co-opted and replaced by furtherance of a ministry. To me, I just don't think that seems healthy. I don't like the idea of taking something that's communal and making it purely singular, aimed at one thing. You could say that about all of these emotions. The joy and happiness that people feel when they're just together and working as a community, or the grief and the sadness at loss, the anger and desire for change. All of those things could be experienced as a community and could strengthen the community. But, as I've often said about the 2x2s, they're not really a community, they're a network. They're a network where you can go anywhere in the world and find somebody who has a meeting that you can sit in and hang out for an hour, and then that's it. They don't function as a functional community. If they did, maybe they'd be able to get rid of the people in them that are causing problems. And by causing problems, I don't mean wearing pants on a Sunday or watching TV. I mean hurting children. But they don't. They don't act as a community. They don't operate as a community. They operate as a network that supports a ministry. And so what should be communal events are treated communally in the sense that they have a potluck afterwards, but the grief isn't shared. I'm no expert, but that doesn't seem very healthy to me. I think that co-opting an event and co-opting all of the feelings and the natural emotions somebody has about the event, or just in general, and making that event or making those emotions about furthering an agenda minimizes the human being, and it separates the person even more from who they are as a person. But of course, workers always teach us that we're bad. Who we are as people, as we're made, as we're designed, is evil. So I guess it's working out for them. I'm going to talk about one more emotion, but in a little bit different way. I'm going to talk about an emotion that 2x2s have that nobody else has. For starters, it doesn't have a name, and I thought about trying to come up with a name, and I've decided not to do that because I don't want to own the concept. I want everybody listening to this to think about it themselves and think about what it means to them. I know some people who are still in listen to this podcast, so I don't want to hijack something and rename it for them. I'll let them just notice it themselves and think about what it means to them. And for those of us who are on the outside, I think you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. There's a certain emotion that people experience in the 2x2s, in meetings specifically, that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. It's shown by combining all of the emotions you're supposed to have into one holy emotion, Holy. It's one emotion, blessed of the Lord, apparently, that many, many, many people seem to have, but only in meeting and specifically only during testimony time. It's shown by being happy, but also a little bit sad and humble. It's a way of showing humility, but also strong conviction. It's shown by a kind of a quivering voice. It's shown by speaking quietly, and maybe your voice is quivering, but earnest. You're very earnest. And you're close to crying because it's so meaningful to you, but also you're not going to completely cry, although some people do. But you're probably not going to completely cry because you got to get your testimony out, and it's really important. It's not sad because you can't be sad in meeting, unless you're sad about people leaving, by the way. You can do that. Sadness is okay if people are leaving meetings. Then you can just weep in your testimonies. That's fine. So you can be sad about that. But this particular emotion I'm talking about now isn't that. It's a sadness about the seriousness of your plight, and maybe there's some sadness about people leaving, but also you have joy because you're inside, so you have to do that both at the same time. It's also not happy because it's serious. So it's that weird happiness-joy paradox where you have joy and it's better than happiness or whatever. So you show that by having this quivering voice and this earnest delivery and kind of a low speaking pattern and a kind of a quivery, uneven speaking pattern and a lot of a lot of that. And it's an interesting thing because it's a unique creation of the 2x2 system. I've never in my life seen anyone else talk like that or exhibit that emotion in any way, because it's not a real emotion. It's a construct of all of the beliefs mashing together at once into a weird uncertainty. I would call it uncertainty, but I would call it uncertainty and confusion, but they can't call it any of those things because they have to be assured of their salvation. So it's all of those things all at once. And I'm not going to name it. I thought for a long time about coming up with a name for this emotion, and I decided not to do it. Everybody just think of the emotion you want to call it yourself and let me know. You can put it in the comments or something. It's really funny to me now, and it's a bit distressing, I got to admit, because it seems abusive. It seems like the people who talk like this act like they're going to get struck down and sent to hell at any moment. So there's fear about that, but also joy about being in meetings, and sadness about those who have left, but also happiness, but more joy than happiness, of course. It's just this big mix of emotions, and it's so interesting, and it doesn't exist anywhere outside of meetings. I just wanted to note it because it was interesting, and it's not just a regular emotion that's been manipulated. It's a manipulative emotion created out of whole cloth. It doesn't exist anywhere else. This tone of voice, this way of talking, this abused puppy way of talking, doesn't exist anywhere else in the world in a healthy place. Any place else you would see somebody talk like this, you would call for help immediately. You'd ask them where their parents are. You'd say, hey, can I help you? Are you okay? Do you need me to call somebody? That's how you would respond when you saw somebody talking like that. And yet in meetings, it's the correct emotion. People love it, especially women, especially sister workers speak this way. And it's not healthy. It can't possibly be healthy. I'm no psychologist, but this weird synthetic emotion can't possibly be healthy, in my opinion. There is a slight variant to this that does have a name. Sometimes sister workers or women will talk this way, but do it kind of high-pitched, so they sound much younger than they are. That's not good in any way, but it's common as well. And I've heard of people talking like this in other churches as well. I saw a video on YouTube one time of Mormons talking about princess voice, and X2x2s talk about princess voice as well. It's definitely a thing. So these voices may exist in some places, but they don't exist in any healthy places. I think we can say that pretty confidently. Systems that teach you not to be angry over injustice are bad systems. Systems that teach you that sadness is inappropriate and should be replaced with some sort of spiritual joy, in my opinion, are abusive systems. Systems that teach you not to be too happy, but also to feel joy, are confusing and therefore a bit abusive, especially when you're teaching that to little kids. Deconstruction, part of the deconstruction process is realizing a lot of this stuff and reframing it. And I highly recommend therapy for a lot of this stuff. Constantly checking your own emotions to make sure it's the correct emotion is very strange. Not understanding your emotions as your body trying to tell you something is weird. It's dysfunctional in a way. And it's a dysfunctional system that tells you that. Recently, my family went to a music concert. I grew up not going to concerts because they were too worldly. No one actually told me not to go to a concert. I just felt like it was the wrong thing to do, so I didn't. The first time I paid to go to any kind of concert, I went by myself in college because there was a band that was just my favorite band, and I couldn't believe it. They were at my college campus, you know. How could I pass it up? So I went. And then I didn't go to another one for years. And looking back now, I've been trying to figure out why that would be. And I realize now that it's because of the emotion thing. There are heightened emotions in music. I'm not going to get into the whole manipulation of emotions through music and through, nonverbal things. There's a ton of content out there online about that. Just go look for it. It's everywhere. Every church does this type of thing, some much, much worse than others. And I'm not going to get into that. There's a whole subtopic of like how the hymns are sung and stuff like that, and how prayer is done and things like that. And I'm not going to really get into that stuff because I'm not an expert in that, and there's a lot of experts in those fields. But I will say that I grew up learning that emotions were supposed to be certain things and not other things. And when people go to music concerts, they get super happy and jump around. And that just seemed wrong to me. I just felt that that wasn't the right thing to do. It was a weird spirit to have. That's the other thing is, and I'm not going to get into this too much, but saying that you have a certain emotion because you do or don't have a right spirit or a good spirit or whatever that means, spirit stuff, that is really hard to define. And telling somebody they have something wrong with them that they can't fix and don't understand is really abusive. So I'll just leave that as that for now. But recently, my family went to a concert, and it was a concert that my kids actually wanted to go to. It was an adult band, but they knew all their music and were really into it. Before we went to the concert, I listened to a bunch of the music, and it was really interesting music. It was very deep lyrics, but very pop rock oriented music. And I found it really interesting too. And I thought, man, I think I would enjoy this concert as well. And it's really cool that my kids are listening to this stuff and talking about the topics and the lyrics and things like that. So we did it. We're not professing, so we could just go. So we got tickets as a family, all of us, and went to this big venue and watched this music. And the emotion just came pouring out of my kids. They were so happy. They were so pumped. One of my kids teared up a little bit just from the happiness of seeing somebody you admired in real life, just the excitement of that, the overwhelming feeling of, knowing this rock band, listening to their music, and then seeing them in real life. It was just an overcoming feeling. And my kids sang at the top of their lungs, and they danced at their seats, and they jumped up and down. And I just looked at them, and it was not lost on me. The experience hit me really deeply, but a little different. And I felt emotional about it. It was very moving to see my kids experiencing something that was evil and worldly, according to my professing self, but they don't have that. They weren't taught that. They weren't taught that a fun time shouldn't be had because it's not joyful. But they could go and just enjoy it and experience it, just experience it thoroughly. It was a very healing experience. I talked about it for quite a while with my friends and my wife and even my kids afterwards, at what a cool experience that was for them. And they may not appreciate it because they've never been told that they shouldn't. They may not appreciate it because they've never been told that they shouldn't enjoy stuff like that. But I was, and it meant a lot to me. I appreciate not being in that system anymore. Any system that tells you that you shouldn't enjoy a happiness because it's not good enough, you need joy. Any system that hijacks your sadness so they can deliver some religious message. And any system that tells you that you shouldn't be angry at CSA, but you should be angry at people noticing it, and you should be angry at victims, that is abusive and wrong. And that's manipulative. And I cheer anybody who's leaving that type of system. Maybe someday they'll clean it up, but right now it's a bad place. It's pretty obvious too, the part that I haven't stated yet, which is all of this is under threat of eternal hell. All of this is under threat of eternal torture. And that's being taught to children very young. And I don't believe that's okay. I believe that's a problem. Teaching kids that the natural emotions that they have are wrong, God hates them, and they will be punished if they don't fix them, creates a very strange uncertainty and uneasiness about being raised in a group like this. And it takes a long time to deconstruct this stuff. This is how you get bitter people. This is how you get people who leave and have hardness in their hearts or whatever nonsense. Because people start realizing as they get older that every emotion they've had has been manipulated and corrected, and they don't exactly know how to feel about things anymore because they have this constant autocorrect that they've been taught. Under threat of hell, under threat of eternal damnation and torture. It's a very screwy way to raise kids, and I'm so glad I don't have to do it. I'm so happy now that I can reclaim these concepts for myself. I can redefine them, but I'm not really redefining them. I'm just correcting the definitions a little bit. I'm reapplying them. I'm taking generally understood concepts and allowing them to exist for myself. And I'm not letting somebody else take them, and manipulate me through them. That's all I'm going to say about emotions. I have a few more videos that I'm going to put out about different topics where I talk about them the same way. Where I talk about how the 2x2 culture manipulates certain things and how we view things and how we experience them to the point that our experience isn't authentic anymore. And when we leave, we have to deconstruct that, reconstruct it, and reclaim it. We have to redefine things for ourselves by figuring out what they actually mean and then applying them to our lives and understanding them better and experiencing them better. I hope you enjoy this series, and thanks for listening.